start off the session. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be discussing about journalism as a career and how journalism looks like from 2021 and beyond, post-COVID times. So we will be discussing about the changing trends in journalism. And we have two esteemed speakers, veterans, academicians, experts from these domains. So let me introduce both of them. And my name is Vaishnavi. I think you would have seen me earlier as well in different webinars. So I work with Mindler. I'm a career specialist. So yes, let's start off. We have Professor Kisterloy Bhattacharjee is a senior journalist who has reported widely from India's conflict zones for over 2 decades. He has written several books and was the first and the only recipient of the Penguin Random House Writers Residency Award 2016. He has received several awards, including the Ramnath Goenka Excellence in Journalism Award 2006-2007 for his coverage of internally displaced people. His coverage of the abduction and rescue of two Italian tourists was nominated for the Best Current Affairs Program by Association of International Broadcasting Awards in 2013. Bhattacharjee also taught in the Department of English in the number of colleges under Northeastern Hill University. He is currently teaching in the School of Journalism and Communication at O.P. Jindal Global School, an institute of eminence, which is a deemed to be university as well, which is in Sonipat, Haryana. Thank you so much for taking out time, sir. In addition, we also have Professor Divakar Shukla, who has more than 2 decades of experience in the field of social and brand communication, communication for development, new media technology, and corporate social responsibility with various premier organizations like World Bank, Netherlands Embassy, along with over 14 years at world's largest communication organization, Ogilvy. Currently, he is the Professor, Dean of Faculty of Journalism and Creative Studies at Jagran Lake City University. The faculty is made up of three flagship schools, which is Jagran School of Journalism and Communication, Jagran School of Visual Arts, Design, and Jagran Viscraft MIME School of Entertainment and Events at Jagran Lake City University. He's also lead. He also leads the advancement and international affairs at the Jagran Lake City University, Bhopal. He is currently teaching communication and development, consumer behavior, advertising, and digital storytelling. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. So to begin with, let's talk about how journalism evolved in this country. So we are talking about times of Doordarshan and All India Radio, and right now we are, in an area wherein we have digital subscription, we have specialization like data journalism, health journalism, sports journalism. So as a veteran in this field, I would want to kind of understand from you, how did you kind of come across journalism trends, how it evolved from Doordarshan to what it is now today? I think we can start off with Professor Bhattacharjee, and then we can move on to Professor Shukla as well.
Vaishnavi, I think, the evolution of media in this country from the time Doordarshan would be a very, very long history to really talk about. I think, you'll have to, it's easier to kind of mark the journey perhaps with a few milestones. And, say, for example, emergency is a great milestone to start with, of how, Ramnath Goenka, published the newspaper with a blank front page as a, as dissent. I don't know whether newspapers today would be able to stand up and do something, but they did. The censorship that was brought in, and how journalists really stood up and fought against that. I think that's an extremely important milestone to perhaps begin with. And after that, like I said, that that's a different conversation altogether to really go into that. But I will bring I will talk about where my journey began and what the milestone would be. is that and how perhaps I chose journalism is something that maybe you want to know. I'm just trying to connect those two, because that's something that the audience may find some salience in. Is that I in till my time, or even today, journalism has always drawn people from all various kinds of disciplines and sectors. Journalism is not rigid about someone who does a journalism degree and joins journalism. I mean, for example, if I've taken Indian Express's name, there's a case in point. Raj Kamal Jha, who is the editor-in-chief, had done his engineering from IIT Kharagpur. So similarly, you will find a large number of journalists all across the world who are, I had a friend who were the deep sea divers. So, you have from deep sea divers to fighter pilots, and I'm not exaggerating, to mountaineers, to trekkers, to writers. You have journalists of all hues actually joining journalism. And during my time, particularly, it would be from humanity, social science, people that would take up journalism to be able to try and with change, with a very naive sense of idealism that journalists have, that they probably will make a difference to the world. And I think that naivety continues to be there. And I think it's good to be naive, to have that naive idealism, because apart from naive idealism, there is nothing else in life, you see. And I'll connect it to to our present last 1 year of this naive idealism. So similarly, I did my literature degree and did my MA and got into MPhil and all that regular stuff. And I wanted a job. I was very sure that I couldn't get into a structured government job. Those days in my times, we had to register our names in employment exchange, and that's how you got a government job or a call for an interview. I mean, I had no idea how to do that. I wanted to leave home and do something on my own, and journalism seemed to be the the perfect fit. So one did that. I was in advertising and then moved to journalism. But I started with Karan Thapar with a weekly news magazine that we used to do called Eyewitness. Those days there were only two, let's say, independent news magazines. One was News Track by the India Today TV, and one was Eyewitness. And I think they were ahead of their times now that I think, if I look back, because we were doing really groundbreaking stories from the field. But it was a weekly magazine, which was a video cassette that people would go out on Fridays and buy. It was not available on a channel, or the only channel was, of course, Doordarshan. And then it became a Doordarshan. It was a show on Doordarshan. So I used to produce one of the shows. We had one Eyewitness current affairs program and Eyewitness chat show. And we used to have censors. Actually, two censors would come and censor every word and see that if there are problems of doing it. But these were recorded programs. But we, there was very little journalism, because Doordarshan was the mouthpiece of the government. Now, interesting thing happened in 1996 or 1995. I joined NDTV. There weren't many organizations then. The television organized channel. It was not a channel. It was just a company. It was a company which used to do one program called World This Week, which was it kind of really established Indian television, quality television in that sense. And I joined, and I was one of the producers for a morning show called Good Morning India, which was one of the first live morning shows that we did as a 2-hour live morning show. And we were on Doordarshan. And I figured out, and the first day we were supposed to go on air. Now, this is a little anecdote, and I'll stop out there. The little anecdote was we were very excited. And Pranoy Roy, my boss, and we used to send the videotape to Mandi House, Doordarshan. Our office was in Greater Kailash. So let's say about 20-25 minutes it would take. There would be a rider who would take the tape and put it in. And we are so excited that today, 9 o'clock news, we are going to do. It is the first independent television software company who will do the nation's, news at night. Suddenly we get a call from someone in the Prime Minister's office saying, "What do you think you're doing?" And we said, the 9 o'clock news. And he said, only the government has a right to do news. We said, but this is an agreement. You're going to have a black screen at 9 o'clock. What are you even talking about? I'm just reconstructing the conversation because he didn't converse with me. He conversed with Pranoy Roy. So I'm just making this up a little bit of the words that happened. And we said that, hey, this is already agreed. This is like a big deal. And he said, no, you can't do news. Finally, it was agreed that it will be called current affairs, as if there's any difference between news and current affairs, just to give you the, a little bit of how the bureaucracy works. And so that night at 9 o'clock, the news went as current affairs. The gentleman is, I think, retired, lives in Andhra Pradesh, the IAS officer there. And that was the first time that an independent news software did the 9 o'clock. Now, this was, mind you, this was 1995. So which means till 1995, Vaishnavi, in India, only the government had the right to do news. Not too long ago. It's only from 95 that actually other people started reporting news on television. And even in radio, till today, you cannot do your own news. Not even in community radio, not even on FM. So the government, and it has been, the journey has been to be able to break the shackles of government interference or government domination. And even the government had to break the shackles. Even the government had to realize that this is not how you do it, that in a democracy you need a free press. And it took, so I think it was a young country, and it's still a young country. And of course, we know over the last few years how the media has been grappling with the issues of of free press, of independent media, of media revenue, etc. But if the question that you asked, Vaishnavi, is too challenging, I don't think so. I'll be able to tell you the history of or evolution of media in even in the entire evening.
Okay, so I can say that 25 years is what we have with respect to media, journalism as such. So before I hand it over to Professor Shukla here, I just want to kind of tell all our participants, I mean, especially students out there, please keep on asking questions. We have our Mindler team answering all your questions, and the best answer will basically win a free career guidance session from Mindler Career Experts. So keep on asking as many questions as you want. We will be keeping a track of all those questions, and we'll reach out to the winner. All right, great. So Professor Shukla, your take on the evolution of journalism.
Well, I was just hoping that Professor Kisterloy just continues, because one is absolutely, he's so right, because it's such a long history, honestly. It's very difficult. I mean, we take the entire semesters, maybe more than that, to teach those subjects to our students, and even then, many times fail. But I think the way that he kind of took off on this, and and I'm just trying to bring forth the focus back on where the milestone he talked about, where the blank page of Indian Express. I think that is definitely one of the cornerstones. But having said that, I think the worldwide, I mean, eventually there used to be a point of time I used to hear journalists tell us there's an Indian way of pursuing news, and globally this is how it is done. But today the trends and basic imperatives are so common. I mean, every journalist across the world are facing the same kind of challenges, the same kind of threats, same kind of opportunities. So I think that is something very, very unique. My journey, I mean, I've never been a practicing journalist, I'll be very honest. And to talk about journalism in front of Professor Kisterloy is like, it's pretty daunting. But having, again, the point, no, it's a fact. I remember, Professor Kisterloy, when I was in Bombay, and many times when we used to go and meet up with some of the editors, for developmental, kind of schools. And this is something that, I often tell to many of the students also. These editors were so profound. I mean, they were so evolved in terms of how they looked at the world. And I think that is where journalism needs to reinvent itself to some extent. That is number one. I'm talking about in terms of education, in terms of studies. That is a very important piece, which means, as Professor said, most of the journalists and the top-notch ones who have done some amazing stuff over the years did not go to a journalism school per se. And Professor Kisterloy definitely would know. One of my friends in Bhopal, who was running one of the newspapers out here, DB Post, Deep Haldar. And we always used to, between us, we always used to chat. He's from English literature as well. So I used to say, why is that English literature, graduates, postgraduate turn out to be such good journalists? My and one of the key lessons out here is, which also needs to be kept in mind, is any journalist or anybody who wants to pursue journalism needs to be well read, needs to push himself herself to read a lot and see a lot and explore a lot. I think that is where. But coming down to the question where the journalism is, how the journey, I'll not get into it. But I can definitely say that today, if you see the level of datafication which has happened in journalism, stories being churned out basis the data analysis, well, all that is fine. But eventually, when you talk to some of the serious journalists and people who write, for different media houses, they eventually come back to say that, the ability to find out news and sense news or maybe unearth news is something that you obviously you are mentored on that, but you learn as well. And the age-old thing in journalism, which says that you will always find news where the worlds collide, is something which I always carry in my head when I'm talking about journalism, is that sense to understand, situation, ecosystem, environment around you, to see where the worlds are colliding, what exactly is happening, good or positive, negative, whatever. And I think that way journalism's journey today, it's so varied. It's so varied. I mean, today, this data part of it, as I talked about, the innovation, some of the things are happening. There's a huge risk also, because you may end up becoming a technology company rather than a news and a journalism organization. So that thin line, something which has to be kept in mind. Also, the line of difference between a journalist or journalism and the audience has thinned beyond comprehension. Today, you have social media managers acting as editors. You have, things being talked about on social media, which again comes back to the same point of this journalism reconfiguration or communication figuration, as we often call it, becoming bigger and bigger. And I think so challenges are big, but I think opportunities are also extremely, extremely interesting at the juncture that we are standing.
Perfect, perfect. So now I would want to move to the future of journalism, and how do you think, COVID has impacted this particular industry, and how post-COVID, I am hoping 2022 is post-COVID. How do you think 2021 and beyond would look like in journalism and related fields? So I think you can probably, Professor Shukla, you can start off, and then we can move to.
Okay, so journalism seen in with the lens of COVID pandemic, yeah, it's very important as of now, because that's one of the key issues which is staring at us, and we are part of it. But I think I have somehow, if I have to, kind of go back to what has happened since last 1 year, 1.5 years now, then all my understanding of how exactly news information, whenever there have been a major crisis in the world, comes to my mind. It's not something which is very, very different right now. Yes, one of the big differences which has happened as compared to the past is today's social media and digital platforms have become huge. So information primarily is being circulated, shared, accessed through different ways. And again, the role of people becoming, or what people many times call it, as a citizen journalism. So I wouldn't call it a citizen journalism, but definitely information flowing and being shared through communities and through people has become a big source of information. But I think there is a catch in that as well. If you see what this pandemic has thrown up, and particularly in context to journalism, I think everybody has come to realize that you need specialists to come back and do a lot of work related to, especially in the areas like health, for example. So I may talk about COVID, I may talk about coronavirus, but eventually at the end of it, the kind of information I give, whether it is from a news perspective or it is from a illustration and example and information perspectives, I need to be accurate and I need to be correct. So I'm not even getting into the zone of fake news and fact checking and all that. That's a very big area. But all I'm trying to say is that COVID certainly has thrown up this particular perspective that today you need specialists to cover stories like health, for example, or environment for that matter. Then you'll take up an issue of education itself. You take up issue of poverty itself. Now, so people would say, were the doctors journalists earlier? Like Professor said very correctly. But there was a big difference which I learned from seasoned journalists who have kind of whenever I have been able to speak to them, they said that as journalists they were reading a lot, they were interacting a lot, they were traveling a lot, they were connected to news where it happens and what issues are happening, and they never used to just pass it off. I mean, there have been instances They never used to pass it off as an expert advice or the opinion, so to say. Today, we have read many news which come out on COVID, which is totally half-baked and which creates more nuisance. So one of the takes is looking at the pandemic and journalism is that I think the need for specialists to come on board and start writing for different media channels, newspapers, platforms is a big need. I may not be a journalist, but if I am put on a beat or I have to cover a story related to health, I need to be pretty prepared in terms of as to what I'm going to write and have the basic understanding. Recently, I was part of one of the webinars or Pulitzer Center which was happening, and it was so heartening to see these two journalists tracing 10 top what you call disease or pandemic prone disease of the world through WHO. And they are chasing those stories. They're finding out what is going to happen, which is the next pandemic which is going to happen. And I have never heard many scientists talk about it in that fashion, the way these two journalists were talking about, young of them. So I think that is where some shifts would start happening in terms of news being covered and journalism coming to fore.
Professor Kisterloy, your take on this?
Thanks, Vaishnavi. When the pandemic hit us, when we started this whole crisis of webinars, let's say, till then we were conversing as human beings, and suddenly we became machine voices, and we seem to be stuck there for now over a year. And I felt, not initially, but after a couple of months, I realized that everything negative that we spoke about journalism, and journalism was going through its worst crisis worldwide, not in India, worldwide. Magazines were shutting down, from Newsweek to every big magazine, every big media organization was facing the greatest crisis, and I would say the greatest crisis in the Second World War. I'm talking before the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, and I would ask everyone today who is watching this or listening to this to consider just for once that from 25th of March 2020 to the 11th of June 2021, if there was no journalism, if there was no media, if there was no communication, imagine the life that you would be leading. You would be in dark ages. So that I think while every sector, every job or every profession is important and critical for the civilization, I think this last 1 year has taught us the importance and of journalism. We are on the front lines. We talk about being COVID warriors. Journalists were not considered COVID warriors, but who brought the news? Who put the pressure? Who said that that there were people getting cremated on footpath? Who gave that drone shot without which the government wouldn't wake up? And that's only recently. But imagine from the time when everyone went indoors, March, April, May 2020, all of us were indoors. But there were still these people without vaccines, without a PPE suit, putting their lives in danger. More than 100 journalists have died since then. No one has mourned them. There is not a single obituary written about them. But look at the kind of work that these people have done in hinterlands. I'm not even talking about in mainstream media, in language media. I mean, imagine a kind of live Vaishnavi in Kashmir. Since 2019, that state, then a state, now a union territory, but went into lockdown. And then you had, so first you had the Kashmir lockdown, then you had the Citizenship Amendment Act crisis, then you had the pandemic. The only way you were connected to the rest of the country or to the news was through media, good or bad. There are good, there are bad. And of course, you can pick and choose. No one's forcing you to watch or read only a particular newspaper. There are more than 500 television channels, which are often called shouting matches. But even through those shouting matches, sometimes a little bit of information comes. Look at how election was covered in the month of April and May this year. hot second wave, a virulent pandemic surging, but there wasn't a single moment, single day when you said that, okay, today there's no newspapers, or today for 1 hour there'll be no television news. That doesn't work. So there were people in the satellite communication room. There were people who were, who were fixing the electrical stuff with broadcast vans, the reporters. I mean, look at the whole gamut of activities that comes into, or for example, the printing press where the newspaper gets printed, or the website, the IT professionals. There's a whole lot of other things that involves the media. Media is not just the byline and the reporter. I mean, I've been a reporter, so I can say that, okay, it's my story. But to be able to get that story on air, there are 100 other people who are working. But look at the effort of bringing news. So I think the future of journalism is very safe because of the very fact that without journalism, the world will not survive. It will not survive, and that's pretty much clear. Okay, I mean, even to put pressure on the fact that, okay, you cannot roll out a vaccine without proper data. I mean, which the medical community and the scientific community, of course, is responsible for doing it. But who puts the pressure? Who makes people accountable? Who tells the government what they should do and what they shouldn't do, or to convey it? Journalists do it, and I think journalism is the only profession that way. And I can safely say that who can question the status quo? We can question anyone. Okay, it's a right to question on behalf of the people, to question anybody, whether it's the prime minister of the country, whether it is the chief justice, or whether it is the president. We question, and that is the core of journalism. So, I mean, young people who are watching this, if you have curiosity within you, if you have a hunger or a fire in your belly to find out the truth, and if you love asking questions, and I know all teenagers love asking questions to their parents, so then you should choose journalism, because journalism makes you ask questions. Now, the glib answer to the future of journalism, as you say, journalism during my time, I said, I could do any discipline and join. That will continue to be there, but journalism also has become a little more specialized, which Divakar says about we need environment, we need, earlier there were beats, all the beats were gone. I think it's important that the beats come back. We need health journalism, so we need specialists, we need environment, we need city beats, and city beat was a very important beat actually, that's gone. Crime beat was there. I mean, the first obituaries. I mean, do you know some of the greatest journalists in the world only wrote obituaries? No one writes obituaries any longer. That's not, and we teach in our course, actually, writing is a very, very important part. Throughout the 6 semesters, we teach writing, because my faculty and I kind of believe that you can pick up any other skill on the job. No employer will tell you, okay, I'll teach you writing. And in most cases, a lot of young people pass out and they find it difficult to string 2 sentences together. And that's the skill that is very important to be a journalist, or to be any communication specialist, or anywhere, to be able to write an email properly, for heaven's sake. I mean, we end up writing wrong mail, and there goes your job, you're gone, or you can't communicate. How do you communicate? Communication is, so again, the future of journalism needs specialists. I think the journalism programs that are developing around the country, around the world, are catered to that. For example, multimedia storytelling that we do. Everything's going to be multimedia in the future. It's no longer going to be just television or just web or just things. We need to understand multimedia, little bit of coding perhaps. I mean, we need to understand that. But the core, at the heart of journalism, is still to make sense of what's happening around the world, to be able to write well, to be able to analyze a situation, to be able to hit the ground running. I think these are not going to change ever, whether it's the future of after the pandemic or before the pandemic. Is just after the pandemic, I mean, there will be, the technical intervention will be far more, but journalism, I think, will continue. And of course, just to end this thing, is that there's an old saying, and I don't know who actually said that, and I can ascribe it to someone. Let's assume some Churchill or Mark Twain or someone said this, okay? And you can fact check this on me, students. You should fact check. A lie can get halfway around the world till truth can put its shoes on. I'm repeating, a lie goes halfway around the world till truth can put its shoes on. And this saying is not relevant only for 2021, it was relevant for 1891. Okay? Disinformation, misinformation has been there since the time of Athens. It is more amplified today because of the kind of communication that we have, the digital coffee that we consume every morning by switching on our Twitter feed or our various social media feeds. So it moves very fast within milliseconds. And our job as journalists is to be able to set that right. And we'll continue doing that. We are the gatekeepers. And we should be able to listen to that knock, midnight knock, wake up, open the door, and actually step out. And I don't think so that's going to change ever. But various specialists, various technologies will of course come in, make it more cutting edge. Let's say a word that we use more in technology. But I still feel that at the heart of journalism is good writing and a fire in the belly to be able to go to the heart of the matter.
Fantastic. I think you've already answered my next question, which was around skill set. So just to sum it up for everybody, you did mention about storytelling, asking questions, and then Professor Shukla talked about reading, knowing about different elements. Now, with your experience, I'm referring to NDTV here. There are a lot of budding, I would say, journalists here. I mean, a lot of students, and I was going through the questions also, they were talking about the skill set. Now, with changing trends and new specializations coming up with respect to sports journalism or data journalism or health journalism, what will your advice be as an expert, as an industry professional? What are the elements students these days should be working on so that their journey becomes much more, I won't say easy, but to become a successful journalist, what are the elements they should actually focus on?
This is not only for journalists, but it could be true for anything that they want to do. I think at their age, they should read, and they should read, and they should read. They should observe, and they should listen. There is no shortcut to it. There is no way. I wish there was a shortcut. I wish I could say that, okay, come and join my course and you'll become a journalist. You'll still have to read. Because if you do not read, you are not going to get there. And and I will be as frank and honest to say that there is absolutely no course in the world which can make you a journalist unless you do this. This is like, and why wouldn't you read? Why wouldn't you read? I think you just it's so easy to get transported into a world which is fascinating. A world, the other day I was reading about Kepler's laws of gravitation and how Kepler basically arrived at that. One day his mother took him up on the hill and he saw a comet passing by, and he wanted to know about the sky. And that's how Kepler's laws on gravitation he developed over a very, very incredibly tough life, where his mother was imprisoned for many years for being a witch hunting, for practicing witchcraft, which she didn't. He was thrown away from various places. It was not easy in his times to be able to do science. Even today, you have anti-science. A lot of people say vaccines are not good. So imagine Kepler during his time talking about gravitation and talking about the sky would obviously be persecuted, should have been hanged, perhaps. There were times when he would have, he was threatened. So I said, when you get into Kepler's life, it's fascinating. Why wouldn't you do that? That's. I'm not saying that getting into the life of or eating pizza. I'm not comparing whether eating pizza and reading about Kepler is better, but I think that stays with you for life. that helps you guide through life. So books are important, and I would say that, they should. There are lots of programs. Data journalism is something that we put a lot of stress on. I personally feel that during my time, newsrooms were felt inadequate because we did not know how to crunch big data. Now I think you cannot go through journalism without being able to crunch data. So you need data journalists will be required more and more. Sports journalists will be required, but they've always been there. Sports page has always been there. So I don't see that as a sports journalism. Again, sports, whether you're a sports journalist or whether you're a science journalist, again, you have to read, you have to write. I mean, there is no shortcut to it. I mean, there's a lovely reporter in Indian Express called Shuangshu Khurana, and she writes on music. And, I would ask Vaishnavi to go and read one of her pieces on the Shehnai player, from who is a Shehnai, Bismillah Khan. I mean, what a beautiful, the way she begins the piece. She begins the piece by saying that on 15th of August, 1947, from the ramparts of Red Fort, the tune of, and she talks about the rag, rises that particular rag on Shehnai. It was Bismillah Khan. Nehru got Bismillah Khan to play that tune on the Day of Independence. How many of you know about it? And and Bismillah Khan, he in Benares. I mean, if you know about Benares, the whole Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb and all that stuff. He would actually play the Shehnai in a mandir out there. All his life he played. And then what happened is actually the article was about his grandson going and selling the silver Shehnai of Bismillah Khan because the family is in such penury, and the guy melts that Shehnai and is making something. And it's a obituary or a paean to one of the greatest Shehnai players. That itself, it brings independence, it brings music, it brings, look at it, it's just the art of writing. And to be able to, of course, research and give so there was research involved. There was a storytelling at the heart. Let me tell you, all the young people, the only thing that connects human beings around the world is stories. Nothing else. Stories are the only connecting fiber of human civilization. And if you will like telling stories, if you like traveling, if you like asking questions, then become a journalist. The toolkit has become a controversial word now, but the toolkit of being a journalist is to be able to tell stories effectively, to be able to tell stories interestingly, compelling stories. Pick up the compelling stories. That day I was listening on radio, a male nurse in a hospital in UP, and his son, when the pandemic started last year, his 2-year-old son developed some kind of an illness, not COVID, and died. He could not come for the cremation because he was working in a COVID ward. So he told the family that, no, I can't come. And the second reason he couldn't come was that there was no one to replace him in that ward, and there were too many serious patients out there. Now, I think that's a very compelling story. Who brings that story to the rest of the country? It's an inspiring story. It's a story that, of course, you feel proud. At the same time, you understand the gravity of a situation. You understand the kind of sacrifices people are making. And you realize that we are privileged, sitting in an air-conditioned room with a Wi-Fi, being able to connect and talk to people. It's a privilege. Hundreds and thousands of people today do not have. The digital divide that the pandemic has created between people who can afford a smartphone or a gadget to be able to study, and the others who are not being able to study. How many generations are going to suffer for that? Who is going to tell those stories? So we are storytellers. So if you like telling stories, please get in touch, and I will take your story. I'll tell you how to tell a story. I'll stop there.
Professor Shukla.
So interesting. It's so lovely listening to Professor Kisterloy. because he's so right. In fact, when you ask that question, Vaishnavi, and so I was trying to frame what comes to my mind in terms of in response to your question. I think Professor is absolutely right, and rather than reiterating many of the things which he said, of course, this writing part of it is one of the biggest challenges, and that's what we all keep on doing, and making sure that you may skip a subject here and course there, but do not miss on the writing and reading part of it. That's the most important part. Second part obviously is this sense of this curiosity part of it. I mean, you need to be, if you're a journalist, or if you aspire to be a journalist, you need to be Sherlock Holmes 24/7 and whatever you want to. You just always in that particular mode of being. And there's a very classic way which many of those mentors talk about, is that look at a child of 4 years, 5 years, even 6 years. Amount of questions they ask you, there's no end to it. There's no end to it. So there's a very classic way in which management uses this term of why chaining. You keep on asking questions, eventually reach to a point whereby there's no other question or there's no other answer actually. But the questions never end. So I think this ability to ask questions, asking questions which would entice impacting results as well, or answers as well, is something that you either are born with or you are mentored with. But having that sense to ask questions is very important. Third, obviously, is the most important thing is observing part. And Professor, you're so right. Allow me to just give you a small, kind of experience I had when I was in school. It's something which I have carried on in my head. So it's more of a personal thing. So my father's elder brother, uncle, he was a writer, and he has written this book, Rag Darbari, Shilal Shukla. And I mean, we were in school. And when you see somebody in the family or people around you, they're writing so well. I mean, they have this felicity of expression. So this, how he used to write it was always fascinated me. And this is totally in sync with what Professor just talked about. So one day I just walked up to him and I said, you know what, I want to become a writer. And I also want to write something. You know what is, and I was looking for some quick tips actually from him, that this is what you should do, this is how you should do. He said, if you want to write about villages, about rural India and all that, wherever, why don't you go to the village and just start seeing things around you? So, and he asked me actually, he said, how good observation powers I have. And at that point of time, I could not connect. I'm talking about writing. He's talking about observation, looking at life around you and all that. And then he explained it to me. He said that you need to observe. More you observe and more you're able to internalize, you'll start connecting the dots. That's where the best, and language would come to you. If you're conscious, if you're reading, language could come to you. These writers, he has written book in Hindi as well in English. But the fact is he was reading translated Chekhov and Russian writers translated into English. He said, what stops me from reading? That's what Professor was saying it so correctly. So this ability to make sense, absolutely correct. It's so important. And that's why, when he talked about this story, what came to my mind, I think it is absolutely pertinent for anybody who wants to pursue mass communication journalism, is to have that sense of observation very, very sharp, and do not lose that sense. Because the more you do it, you'll see everything looks in a very standardized fashion. Everything looks very homogeneous. It's not. The worlds are colliding every second. That's what I say. And when the worlds collide, within the families, outside the families, neighborhoods, cities, countries, that's where the stories, take shape. It may be form of a news that you come out. It may be a form of what he described of Indian Express writing about Bismillah Khan and Shah. Look how beautifully it has been written, what he described. So this sense of asking questions, observations, ability to, it gives you a high actually. If you're able to unearth the story and you're able to write beautifully, how beautiful that moving piece becomes. And by the way, it's just not any other, Shakespeare writing a particular piece or writing a novel. Interestingly, journalists, when they write well and when they are able to bring facts to life, information or impact to life, it impacts millions. I remember people used to talk about, I want to become a civil servant because I'm going to go to the district and change the life of people. I mean, imagine what Professor talked about in COVID times, or for that matter, everywhere. When you write a great piece, when you bring a great information to the light without being too much biased about it, how big impact you make. So that's are the key things which you need to rediscover in yourself and look at it and then maybe go for it. And if you're able to do it, you may get less CGPA in the universities or more CGPA. But if you have the ability of what Professor talked about, which I reiterate very strongly, I think you will be in a great space to become a good journalist. Whether data journalism is there or not, whether analytics is there or not, but you will be a great storyteller. In every way, you will be able to do that piece. I mean, that's what my take is, in addition to what Professor very rightly kind of shared with us.
Great. So now I would want to talk about education as such. And so back, I think about 20 years back, 25 years back, courses like journalism, courses like law were actually taught at the master's level. So students used to do some sort of undergraduation and then move to maybe law or mass comm at the master's level. So now, as a career specialist, I have come across a lot of parents who kind of ask me about why should students study mass communication at the undergrad level. So we have these amazing institutes these days, whether it's Jagran University or it's OP Jindal. So what do you think students will learn with respect to industry exposure? So maybe we can talk about USP. So for example, I think I'll start off with Professor Shukla here. So Faculty of Journalism at Jagran. So what is the USP, and what are the kind of industry exposures? What are the different kinds of elements that students are taught at the undergrad level here?
Okay, so Vaishnavi, to respond to your question in terms of my faculty and what we do, I think it's not something that is totally unique that nobody else is doing in the world. That's not the point. That's really not the point. The point is the content which these undergraduate or postgraduate students go through, over the course of 3 years or 4 years or 2 years, takes them on a journey right from day one. I mean, just to illustrate, when the student joins the undergraduate program, say after class standard 12th, I mean, they cannot just become journalists in day one or maybe in first semester or second semester. And I think Professor mentioned it right in the beginning. It's a course of 6 semesters, 3 years or 4 years. So what we essentially try to do is people who opt for journalism, at that point of time, and I don't know if it is true, maybe in professors' experience as well, many of the students who come into these programs, they come with a predetermined mindset, I'm going to become a television journalist, because there's aspirations to do something. Then there will be students who will come, I want to become an anchor on a news reader and whatever. Somebody would say, I want to become a travel journalist. I want to become something else. Fair enough, that's a perfectly fine thing to keep in mind as a vision. But eventually at the end of it, what we try to do is to groom them on a very, very basic level. Now, basic level, apart from the courses or the subjects which they study, whether they are in the photojournalism areas or they are into the mass communication, basic theoretical areas, constructs areas, we try to, right from semester 1, we try to give them a whole lot of experience on ground as well. As we talked about this observation part of it and connecting part of it, more they are exposed to it, because one of the what you call the gaps that we are seeing across is that many times students, not all, I'm not making a generalization, but many times students are not exposed to the realities of life which surround us, whichever form. They tend to forget that, or they have not been able to get a chance to explore that. So right from day 1 or late semester 1, we start giving them a scope to move out of the classrooms, along with the theoretical constructs which they study and mentored. They start moving out and seeing things around. They don't have to document and give news stories, but they start documenting things the way that they want to. Second is, as Professor very rightly said, and I know that OP Jindal does it very well as well, we focus a lot on those writing part of it. So not just the writing part of it, but reading part of it as well. So they read stuff which is kind of mandated for them to read, but they can read anything. And then we are able to get them to actually talk about whatever they have read. So there are lots of sessions we do, and I'm talking about just not the academic examination oriented thing, because a journalist does not only need to sit in an examination and give and become a journalist. Those things we do a lot of it. So first 2 years essentially, or I would say 1.5 years, is a lot of effort is made in that area. But then obviously we expose them to, say for example, a subject like communication for development or development journalism. Now you can teach that subject, which is taught as a part of most of the universities. But do you give them a chance to visit villages way off, which are totally non-connected? Whether you give them a chance to spend the entire day in those villages and come out with the reports which are very, very, kind of intrinsic to what they thought about it. is what gives them the aptitude to start exploring things all over. So that's something that we kept on doing. I was listening to the professor. There was a question which talked about investigative journalism. So what we do is, I mean, there may not be a different UG program for investigative journalism, but it is embedded as a separate course altogether because it's an important piece to have it. How do you explore that? So there are lots of things of this nature we do. And then of course, who better to mentor these students to have the faculty who have been practicing journalists. I mean, here we have a professor. If he tells about something, of course, the theory, the academics, everything would come into play. But imagine a situation that he tells you about what happened when World This Week was being created. What was the thing behind it? Who better to tell you than the journalists who have done some great, amazing work? So, of course, as a part of the faculty, and they are academicians, but who have been practicing journalists in different ways. We focus a lot because we're based in Central India. We focus a lot, along with the English journalism, we focus a lot on vernacular journalism. And it is very important for students to kind of cash onto it or take advantage of their vernacular backgrounds, their languages and everything. We do a lot of that work. One way that we kind of push these students to explore those nuances is to work with community-based organizations, the journalists I'm talking about, or working with the panchayats, or they're also many times they're working with the NGOs as well, where they are documenting stories of what the NGOs are doing. Say, for example, if there are 10 women who have done some amazing work as a part of an NGO work, to document those stories in a way which does not glorify them too much, but brings out facts in life is a great way of integrating these students with what is happening around you. So there are a few things that we do. Of course, portfolio is something that we focus a lot on. I mean, the final capstone projects and all, they have to have portfolio from day one. And after 1.5 years, you see the portfolios, brimming with lots of ideas and things. And I think certainly you start realizing which areas they want to get in. So become the journalist first, and then decide whether you want to be in the television or you want to be in the print and whatnot.
This is fantastic. Let's again move on to Professor Kisterloy here. And with respect to the School of Journalism and Communication at Jindal, like how is it with respect to students studying journalism there?
Vaishnavi, I wish the easy, not the easy, I wish the course was Rag Darbari, where Ranganath actually goes to his uncle's village to recover and learns about, interior parts of India. That is journalism. So that is all that we teach. So I mean, which means the students should be able to pick up Rag Darbari and read that. It's one of the greatest classics that we have and you should be able to, also to be able to read the other classics. It should give you that hunger to be able to know the hunger, and how do you generate that hunger amongst young people? And that is, I think, a challenge that today teachers are facing, because when I was a student, the city's only library, the state central library, and my teacher were the center of my universe. There was no internet. Today, for you, I am no longer the center of the universe because you have an internet, you have information. But what you probably will not have is that how to connect that. And as teachers, we help you connect. I'm telling you that Ranganath's story of going and finding about interior Uttar Pradesh is journalism, is the study of journalism. So, we started in 2017 the journalism school, and we had the wonderful luxury, I must say, of imagining an absolutely new course, given that the dean, who was the founding dean, Professor Tom Goldstein, and I owe it to him entirely. I don't think so. I would have been in journalism education if he wasn't there. Tom, for 30 years was the dean of the Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism and of Columbia School of Journalism, the two most well-known global schools of journalism, though there are several other schools of journalism. And he was also at New York Times before that. He was the press secretary to the mayor of New York. He taught at Stanford and Yale. And he was with the Associated Press when the Vietnam War was going on, when the Pentagon Papers broke. Now, these are history. Now you suddenly have this man amongst you. And Tom is a soft-spoken, gentle, very highly, refined man. And I draw on his wisdom because, I'm a journalist, I'm a hack, I'm a reporter. I didn't know how to make a curriculum really. And, I could make a little mishmash of what I think would be journalism. I would probably put Ranganath out there or something of that sort. But Tom helped. Tom and I would meet every day, and it's a curious journey of how a curriculum is built. So again, to make it very simple for people watching it, is that you're doing out there, we offer a journalism major in the liberal arts tradition. So it is basically a liberal arts course where you do a major in, or you get a degree in journalism. Journalism or journalism skills is one trajectory in the course of 6 semesters, but the others are writing, or for example, religion and caste, without which you can't understand India. Gender and sexuality, you can't understand modern society without that. Climate and environment, absolute must. Someone on the chat asked me about climate and environment. I think the future is climate and reporting climate and environment. That is where a lot of journalism jobs are going to be there. We teach micro and macroeconomics, and the students try to run away because they run away from numbers. But we try and make them fall in love with numbers. So we call it understanding numbers instead of calling it micro and macroeconomics, and then take them to data journalism. And when they figure out data journalism, they love it because, out here they're crunching big data, and it's fascinating to be able to get that kind of data and to be able to crunch it and do stories. You suddenly find yourself empowered. So you're empowered with knowledge. You're empowered with the tools to be able to expose people, to be able to hold people accountable. I mean, how will I hold the Supreme Court of India accountable? I mean, that sounds terrifying, right? I mean, they can send you to jail. But no, I mean, I can hold, and I should hold the courts of India or the judiciary accountable for the number of cases that are piled up, for the number of under trials. And all you need to go is check out government websites for the data. You don't have to go digging for data in graveyards. I mean, they're there right in front of you. So we teach them how to be able to source that data. It's not great. Investigative journalism, I've been an investigative journalist. It's not like I go with a spade and, I kind of, I'm not a detective. I don't have that skill. It's just that you have to know where the information is lying. And, right now in my bag, actually, this is investigative journalism. Let me tell you, because I got this today. This is Court of Inquiry of the Indian Army, and I'm not showing you this confidential 400 pages of stuff that someone has given me. Who has given it to me? A serving general in the army. And, because I work on fake encounters. So this is, on one of the cases that I was following. And he came and gave it to me. I am kicked about it. I'm dying to go through it because this is adrenaline. This is the rush. So we generate this thirst or this hunger in people to be able to enjoy what we call journalism, but in the liberal arts tradition. So there are a lot of subjects that are taught apart from journalism, which are humanities and social science, without which I don't think so you will be able to make sense, because journalism itself is not a subject. You see, journalism itself is a combination of everything. And that makes journalism so unique. So you can I did a master's and an honors in English literature, but maybe I missed a few things there, out here, because, and those journalism undergraduate courses did not exist then. But today we are telling you of how to be able to connect those dots, of how you can tell stories in one frame, how you can tell stories in 5 frames, how you tell stories in 25 frames, which is a second in television. So 1 second is actually 25 frames. So how do you tell stories? So no one told us how to tell stories, but we read a lot. Now, reading seems to be a bit of a problem. We try and push and goad people to be able to read. And how I do it, I don't know, others have different ways of doing it. I teach, for example, this last spring semester, I taught a course called Literature and Violence. Now, what did I pick up? I picked up, Sadat Hasan Manto. I picked up Mahashweta Devi. I picked up Svetlana Alexievich. I picked up Suzanne Sontag. Now, these are, and I tell students that when you pass out of this university, if you do not know Suzanne Sontag's name, how do you even show off? At least for the sake of showing off, pick up these names and pick up these books. Because a lot of things that, Diwakar, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of movies and books that we read or during our time was also part of to sound serious, that was part of pretension, but it was good pretension because we picked those books up and we read them. So, I wouldn't have read Rag Darbari because my father was telling me to read Rag Darbari. But how can you not know about Rag Darbari if you are a literature student? That would be anathema. So, I think this is whatever I tell you about the course or about the faculty, brilliant faculty, very proud of working with them. They come from different, so if we teach history, it is a historian teaching history. Okay, if it is writing, it's a writer teaching writing, a specialized, a data journalist teaching data journalism. I don't go into teaching that. And what I do is that, and what we try and do is that for journalism, we try and actually have people who are still practicing journalists rather than who, Diwakar, I will be talking about my nostalgic, what I did 10 years ago. And I don't think so that's really fair. And journalists love listening to their own voice, particularly if they're television journalists. So I try and, stay away from that temptation. And we have, and of course, to allow industry connect. So we allow people or invite people who are, who are coming, attending newsroom meetings and coming and teaching, because that's the experience that comes, right? And of course, what we couldn't offer during the pandemic is the field experience. That's crucial. And I hope we can get back to physical classrooms once again, because without field trips, without actually going into the studio, we have, high definition television studios, radio studios. Oh, one thing, I don't know what late Jagran City does or not. Our television and radio instructors were sanguine, and they're passionate about the fact that radio is more important than television. I think they're a little more biased towards radio. And Tom and I thought that, yeah, why not? Radio is actually it's actually a greater medium, if you say, because it's more accessible. Okay, it's easy to buy, easy to. Television, you need a whole lot other things to be able to. A radio is almost free. You get a transistor any part of the world, you'll be able to catch the radio waves. So we have a radio studio, and so in the journalism trajectory, the first semester you do journalism skills, then you do actually radio 1, then you do radio 2, and you do visual imagination. Then you do television 1, television 2, multimedia storytelling. So it kind of, it moves that way. Similarly with, in the economics or in environment, or in various or other social science, we kind of have that trajectory. We hope that will prepare students to go in for higher studies, prepare them to ask questions, prepare them to be able to crunch data, and possibly generate in them the hunger to expose the truth, to be able to ask questions, and to be able to bring home and tell compelling stories. Just an attempt, and I hope some students at least that's what teachers can only expect. Like I said, in a universe where we no longer are the center of the universe.
This is fantastic, and I think we've kind of crossed our time limit also, but I just want to have a final conclusion remark, I would say. We've seen a lot of students these days coming up to us, and when we ask them to read, they say that, we preferred watching a web series. Now, a lot of these web series are obviously adaptation of some or the other novel. So what is your take? I think we can start off with Professor Kisterloy and then we can move on. And then that's how we can kind of conclude the session as well. So what is your take on this?
Vaishnavi, I think we need to, and I need to move with times and try and appreciate and understand various modes of communication. We can't be rigid. Uh, if I ask students what is the source of their news, they say that some of them would say that they get their news from late night comedy shows or from in shorts. I don't know what those are. I don't get my news from there. Um, I try and encourage them to buy a physical newspaper and read. I think there is a joy in doing that. But if they can consume the same news out of a mobile phone, I am no one to say that don't do that. But at least read the news. Except it's also unhealthy to look at the screen for such a long time. So it's not about what is the thing. I think it's just simply that you want to save your eyes for the rest of your life, and you don't want to spend from morning till night looking at a screen, and that to a small little screen, and read your news and watch your movies and watch your web series and everything. So I think there's value in spreading it out. Maybe read a newspaper, watch a TV, look at the phone when you are traveling in a metro, going to places. Obviously, that is the best way. They are. I think they have at their disposal all various forms or modes of communication. The idea is that to be able to teach them the discretion of what to watch and what to read, what to consume. That's not a pill really that can be given. And I think this education really also prepares them or educates them to do that. You have a remote control in your hand, right? You can serve the channels, any number of channels, but you watch one channel. I don't know which channel you watch, Vaishnavi. Don't tell me because I'll start judging you then. So, but it's your choice. I can't force that. It's like writing a book and the book goes to the market. Can I control who reads it or who should read it? I can't. I let it be there. So I think young people know what to watch, who to watch, and if they react in a way that to us seems exaggerated, I think that's fair enough. At their age, one should try everything. One should explore everything. I think I think I would be happy if they are talking, if they are asking, if they are watching, exploring everything, rather than actually not doing it at all. I think that would be more worrying. So I wouldn't control.
Thank you so much, Professor Shukla. And then we
I totally agree with Professor because and then just to go back to something which he had talked about, this radio part of it. Interestingly, this is exactly how we have also been experiencing the students' interest. So at our university, one of the things we had done, which is something which very, very innovative, but we have done it very consciously. We have a radio station run by the students. So this Lake City Voice, which is a radio station, and it's a digital radio station which is available anywhere in the India. These students are able to really actually offer it. So when we started about 2 years back, we thought that television should be the first one we should be kind of taking off. But it's so heartening to note that students actually opted for this, semester 1 and semester 2 kind of students to come on board with radio. Of course, the big kind of a attraction is to become an anchor to start with. But the fact is, the moment they get into that loop, and there are some fine, kind of a radio journalists and radio, mentors to coach them, they are able to start understanding what's happening, and then they latch onto it. So I think it's a very, very important piece. We also do a lot of, theater, training for these people as well, because I think theater teaches you a lot of good things as well as a part of our understanding. Going back to your question, Vaishnavi, related to watching web series, watching television, and watching and not reading it, I totally agree with Professor, because I think times have changed. So I may be loving my newspaper and sitting down and reading with a cup of tea or coffee. I think it's not necessary for these youngsters and students of today not to be on the mobile phones and on the digital tablets and all and getting the news. One of the things we often miss is, and this is something which needs to be corrected in ourselves, is that we think that these people, when I say these people, essentially shows that there's a big divide. the generation that we are working with, I think we're learning a lot of things from them. That's number one. Number two, they're very smart. They're aware of what is happening around them in a big way. So they may appear to be like that, but I think my mind goes back to this Hindi movie. I think this was Amir Khan movie, which Chak De Basanti or something, where, we often think that these people are not, tuned to what is happening. They're very much in tune. But one of the things which I think everybody who's out here as a part of this particular webinar should understand, when you read, your ability to imagine also goes up. When you're watching things, you often miss on that because everything is very obvious. If I want to show you a ghost, if you're reading through a book or an article, your ability to imagine a ghost is far, far bigger, profound than when you see something. I can show you a ghost which is very, very dangerous and horror, looking. But if you read something happening, you start imagining. And I think the sense of imagination is one of the key tenets of any creative careers, or for that matter, journalist, or for that matter, anything else. So I think if you read, you also imagine. That's a kind of a neurosciences tells you that. So I think while we should not judge them, I totally agree with the professor. I think also these students should realize that reading is just supports the entire thing of building up their curiosity and imagination. So that's how I would, kind of react to it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, both of you. It was great having you on board and discussing about a career which is so close to your heart. And for all the students out there, feel free to kind of, explore, experiment, understand your own skill set, and understand what are the skill set required in the careers you are looking at. And this is the right time. If you are in class 12 right now, or if you are about to graduate from class 12, this is the right time for you to develop all of these skill set, because this becomes your habit, which eventually becomes your life skill, and eventually will help you in any of the field you would want to look at. Yes, sir.
I just allow me for a second, because I just stuck on one of the questions which I was asked, and I think it
Sure.
very well with what Professor also said it. So the question comes from somebody who says that something us youngsters have realized is that most news channels broadcast news from a negative point of view, and social media gives much more real news. My response to you, Nabiha, would be, you may be completely right in your perception and understanding, but if you want to change this scenario, that's what Professor Kishalya said right in the beginning. You need to develop your own faculty. You need to come and work on yourself to become great and big, good journalists and storytellers. The moment you do that, situation will start changing, and it's already happening. So my only one bit to you would be, get into this profession with a sense of what you want to achieve and have that happiness of doing it. You would change this scenario. All of you would be starting to change it, which is already happening with the set of young journalists who are coming into this fold, right? Thank you, Vaishnavi.
Thank you so much. So, students, please go ahead and check the website of OP Jindal as well as Jagran Lake City. You will understand the kind of curriculum they have. They have an amazing course related to journalism and communication. And for all of you who are still confused about what you want to look at, please go ahead and kind of seek career advice. Look at your own aptitude, personality. So at Mindler, we have a psychometric assessment which assesses students on 56 different parameters. Feel free to reach out to any of us for any more details. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Professor Shukla. Thank you so much, Professor Kisterloy. It was great having you. And we'll see you all again with the next webinar with the next topic. Till then, please take care. Please stay indoor and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Bye, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Diwakar. Thank you, Vaishnavi.